Hello and welcome to another episode of Throttle Stop Garage. In episode 53, we're actually going to start the process of getting the carbon fiber fenders made. I really hope that this is going to be a good video. I've watched lots of videos. I think I've read all the books. I'm not too sure if I've got them all covered, but I'm pretty close. And there's no definitive answer on how to do any of this stuff. I've asked on forums and on Facebook groups, and I just don't seem to get some really great responses out of this, and that has me a bit worried. Actually, more than a bit worried. I've lost sleep over this for years. So this weekend, this is what I'm up to, and before I leave the garage, I'd like to have one fender pulled. Okay, as I go through the process of putting the carbon fiber in the molds, I'm going to describe in detail every single element of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So there's got to be some way to transport that knowledge from me to you. And again, I've only ever pulled the parts that you saw in previous episodes in carbon fiber, so I've not got a good deal of experience doing this. This would be like my third part. So I may be very much like you, and honestly, I can't figure out some of the other details, like what fabric do I pick? How do I put the fabric? How do I orient it in the mold? What about core materials? How does all of this stuff work? I'm not going to spare you any of the details. I'll actually go over each one. I'll describe the decisions that I made, and I'll give you an explanation for why I made the decisions that I made. I hope that helps. That's my objective in all of this work, is to try to create some content that gives you what you want. I mean, everyone can watch the videos of somebody pulling a vacuum through a nicely made production style mold. They're not working in their garage. They're not working with the stuff that you and I are working with, and they probably have, again, lots more experience. So they don't tell you. They just simply don't tell you. Maybe it's an industry secret as to how this stuff works. But I'll fill you in on all the details in this video. So the first thing that I did after reading a bunch of books, watching some YouTube videos, and just trying generally to figure this out, I'm always looking for the answer. I want to know why. In my quest to find the answer to these questions, I did manage to find one company that was willing to share some of this information with me and to work with me to try to develop the fenders and the other parts that I'm going to make for this car, rather than trying to hold back. They were very willing to give me information. I'd like to give a shout out to Jake and the staff at Composite Envisions. They're located in Wisconsin for my US viewers, and they're a one-stop shop for all of your carbon fiber needs. Almost 2 hours on the phone with me going over every detail. And I kept telling them, hey, I don't want to know the cheapest way. I want to know the way that you would do it if you had one part to make in your garage and you needed it to work. That was the rule. One part, one shot, has to work. So some of the materials are more on the expensive side of that price range, but who cares? You're going to hemorrhage money when you're building carbon fiber parts anyways, so you don't get to choose that part. So we might make a few mistakes, but we're going to give it a shot. But now I want to explain why we're using the fabric that we're using in this for the fenders and for the rest of the project. A lot of people will be familiar with this kind of material here. This is a standard 2x2 twill. This is a 3K, so it's 3,000 fibers per toe. So that's each one of the little lines. This happens to be 150 grams per square meter, so it's not particularly heavy. I was using it on the first Infusion project, and you'll see that it's got some pretty good properties. It drapes pretty well, right? It's got strength this way, which is the way it's coming off the roll, right? And if I pull it the other way off the roll, it's got strength that way. So it's got strength in each direction that I have the filaments. And this way, if you go 45 degrees to that, of course, it has that sort of herringbone pattern. It stretches a lot. Okay, so that's one kind of fabric that is very commonly used in carbon fiber. Now, I'm not using this in the fenders except for in the form of a reinforcement tape. that I can reinforce some of the structural areas. So I use that material along the bolt flanges and some of the other areas where mechanical fastening is going to be attached. So the main fabric that I'm using is this fabric here. So it's quite a bit heavier than the other material that you just saw, than the regular kind of traditional looking twill. So this is a satin or harness weave. So what happens here is each one of the toes in the direction that it's coming off of the spool is going over or under 5 or 4 of the other of the one going this way. So this fabric has a lot more strength going, in this case, north and south than it does east and west. Okay, now it is used in the production of silks, satins, and others. So it drapes phenomenally well. This is a 6K product, so 6,000 of the individual carbon fiber fibers per toe, and this is almost 400 grams per square meter. So it's over twice the weight of the other material. So it's considerably thicker. You can build bulk very quickly with it. As well, you can just see even as it sits on my arm, it drapes really nicely. So when I told the good folks at Composite Envisions about my challenge with the fenders with the different curves and things, this was their suggestion, because it drapes so well. Even though it's thick, it can conform to those twists and turns without any trouble at all. The other material that we're using here, which you can see reasonably well, is a biaxial unidirectional material. So this happens to be 12,000 K, so 12,000 filaments per toe. It's not woven, so it is stitched. You can see there's a light thread line going through it. The stitching is in line with the roll. All right, and then the fibers are oriented at 45 degrees on one side, and then on the other side, their orientation is reversed. So it's like 2 sets of material that are oriented at right angles to each other. So 2 at 45 is what we're looking at there. With the fender, layup is to put on 1 layer initially, right, of this harness material going with the strength north and south. Then layer on top of that the biaxial material. So we have a north and south strength with the original material, and this material gets us a 45 and a 45. Then we'll be putting another layer of the harness weave material on, but we're going to change the orientation from north-south to east-west with the strength. Then we're going to add a foam core. Then we'll add another layer of the 45-45 biaxial. And then finally a 5th layer of this material, also going in the east-west direction. Okay, so we're getting going with creating the cardboard patterns to cut out the foam core material. So I need to cover that back corner, and I thought I would go all the way up to that front edge just to give the thing some stiffness. That was the goal anyway. I did end up with it kind of in the wrong place for my trim, but that's fine. Anyway, then some standard sort of pattern making material. This is it's a non-woven sort of paper-based material. It works great for this. I need to economize on my use of the carbon fiber. It's a really complicated part. I can't just drape the material over top of this and then pray it'll work. So I made some patterns to help me out there. So that fits in nicely. It's all trimmed up. And now we're ready to go with the mold prep. So we're using the Freekote 700 NC. There it is. On this, and that was after applying the mold sealer. You'll see that later on to get that all done. So you apply it in a strict pattern, so it goes north, south, east, west, and then 45 degrees and 45 degrees. You can see how slippery it gets on application. It has to dry between each coat because a very, very slight resin that gets put on here
and that allows the parts to cleanly release without the use of waxes. Alright, so these parts, as I've indicated before, are getting primed in the mold. Sorry for the no carbon fiber look, folks, but this is a classic car, so that would look a little goofy on it. And this also ensures when you prime in the mold that any of the flaws that are in the mold don't come back to haunt me later. So all the pinholes and other problems that I've had will be sealed by the primer, and I won't get any epoxy soaking into them and then causing that part to stick in the mold.
Okay, so the primer is from, well, actually Hawkeye Industries, Duratec Technologies, and it's a Duratec Gray VE, which stands for Vinyl Ester primer. So this is a primer that you harden or you catalyze with the same MEK material that you use with fiberglass. It's meant for resurfacing molds, or you can actually spray and prime right into the mold. So that's what I'm going to be doing, so that the parts come out primed, and it'll bond really effectively to the epoxy resins. It's supposed to be a really good thing. I've never used it before, so let's get the lid off and get going on it. 2% hardener or catalyst actually per weight. Even in their own video they get that wrong. They say 2% per volume. It's not volume, it's weight.
Well, as I get going on the spraying, boy, this was not easy. You get a first mist coat that you put on, so you just see that there, and then you give it for all it's worth. This will harden up in the gun in 20 minutes, so you don't get a whole ton of time with it. And it was really tough to get up underneath that lid primed up properly, but away we go. So at this point, I'm going to show it no mercy and just soak it in there. And it, you know what? It took it just fine. It didn't feel like it was going to run or sag or do anything silly on me. So super happy with the way this all worked out.
All right, now here we have it. This primer, that Duratec VE, has been sprayed into the mold, and it's dried up now overnight. So just too tired yesterday to finish the job. But it actually looks really good. I'm super happy with the way that all turned out. I mean, it's sort of like spraying sealing texture. It's really thick. I mean, that's a 2.3 millimeter needle, and it can just barely get the stuff out. But now you can see the real quality of the mold, all the work that's gone into it. Everything is looking really nice in here. I did find a few more little holes, but they're just tiny little pinholes. And you know what? We're going to roll with it. There's no way. I can't figure out how to fill them. I could just dab them full of the primer, but let's not worry about those. I don't imagine they're going to amount to much. Okay, famous last words. Next up is core materials. Just going to quickly cover the core materials. So this is Mycell. It's a closed cell polyurethane foam, so nothing gets through it. I made the cardboard pattern, which you've already seen. That cardboard pattern will just be cut out. The material is that without compression, 6.5 millimeters is the material thickness. So that's what we're going to add in that sandwich. And just the act of separating the two layers of carbon fiber increases the strength dramatically. So we'll be cutting out the shape and then tapering off the edges to make that all, make sure we don't have any bridging problems. This is what I have left. This little space right here. That's it. Everything else in the garage is covered in stuff, and I've barely got room to walk.
Alright, so here we are cutting out that Mycell foam. Really easy to cut. I just used a sharp Stanley knife here to cut out the shape that I wanted from my cardboard template. And now you can see me laying out a grid pattern on the part, and that's needed so that the resin can flow through it. Otherwise it's just a great big barrier and that won't work. So that's an 1.5 inch pattern, or about 38 millimeters for each one of the squares. And then I'm drilling a 1/8 or 3 millimeter hole, and I did actually drill from both sides, right? Be very careful that none of the foam that remains in the hole plugs the hole. The hole has to be perfectly clear. I went through the extra step of actually sanding over the edge just to make sure it wasn't just a cut edge, but it was nicely tapered. I give you the model number, so there you can see
from Composite Envisions, the model, or the product number, sorry, for this particular material.
Alright, so instead of trying to draw around that pattern, I just use masking tape because that prevents the material from fraying, and with this harness weave it actually helps keep it together and a little bit straighter. So in it goes into the mold, and then we're using a little bit of some specialized spray glue in order to hold it into there. I made the mistake actually of trying to do the bottom parts first and then go up. In future layups, as I was learning here, I started in the middle of the fender arch and then went out to the sides from there, and that tended to work a good deal better. So I'm paying particular attention to trying to get it tucked up and in tight to that mold surface, doing all I can, and then I go back and trim off where that tape was.
Alright, that's the first layer of fabric in the mold. I had quite a bit of fun with it. I'm really glad this isn't a part that is looking for the carbon fiber look, as I made a bit of a hash of some of these areas in here where the fiber is kind of going like this. But it's all painted, so this isn't going to matter. And don't peel it up after you put it down. So 45 by 45 is what they call it, but it's... Anyway, this is a 12K fabric, 150 grams per square meter, and there you see the number, so F1992.
Okay, unlike the other material, this is only 50 inches wide. I'm not too sure what that would be in units. Everyone would understand a meter and a bit. Anyway, and it doesn't stretch, right? So it's really hard to get into some of these compound curves and corners, but I managed to figure out how to do it, and I don't have to worry about which way I'm cutting it off the roll. So I just cut off the 50-inch part, and that seemed to work really well. So again, using the glue to get it all in and in place, and that's the biaxial layer pretty much finished up. Now for the next layer of the harness weave, I changed the orientation around, right? So the next two pieces will be cut off that roll in an opposing direction, just for increased strength. So we're just trying to get the stress lines to be as even across the part as we can. In goes the foam core, and then I tape up, trying to fit it in to waste as little of this material as I can. I'm still very nervous about not having enough material here to do my whole project, but I'll probably end up with lots at the end of the day. Alright, so that last piece goes in. Now the one thing I did learn was as you're layering the parts in, it actually becomes increasingly difficult to layer each piece in. So as you're building the volume of material, it's harder and harder and harder to put it in. Fortunately for me, I kept learning how to put it in, so I was getting better and better as I went. But you just have to watch where the glue is and how it's getting stuck down. Alright, next up, the peel ply. Note from my previous Infusion video, I'm now using this green coated peel ply. It's just brilliant stuff. It doesn't stretch at all, right? So having that pattern that didn't stretch at all was really handy for cutting this out. It also just lightly glued down in areas where it needs it. And in this case, I didn't quite do this as great as I did later, but it was okay. Then the mesh, this is the flow mesh, so that basically keeps the bag from being in direct contact with the peel ply, which allows everything to come off. So it creates a bit of space. And then I'm using an Infusion channel. This is called EnkaFusion. It's an Infusion channel, and then it goes in. And as I put that mesh in, I was having a conversation with the good folks on Facebook. DIY Carbon Fiber is the name of the Facebook group, and I'd show them pictures, and they kept saying less Infusion mesh, cut it back, because it creates a resin block, which is super important. Now I didn't show you the video of the first time I bagged the part up, because A, the video didn't work, and B, I didn't do it properly. Bagging is hard. The bag needs to be several times larger than the part, and it has to be loose, and you have to figure out what you're doing with taping. Like, all of this requires a lot of thought, and what I found was I had to think about where I needed to lose area. right? So in the whole thing, you're trying to get the perimeter to come in, but you have to lose area in the bag and lose it in the right place. All right, that's the first vacuum pulled. And then you spend whatever, hours running around the tape line looking for tiny leaks and stuff. All right, for the Infusion resin, I selected INF114 with a slow hardener. Now, the slow hardener was used for a reason. So the slow hardener gives you the time that you need for things like adjusting the bag if you need to, or like I mixed the hardener up and I could let it sit for 20 minutes or half an hour, It didn't even bother me. So it's mostly about workability. All right, so here's the infusion going. This is in real time, so it goes quickly enough, but you have to throttle it back a bit.
So far, so good. It's not looking bad. The work that's gone into this, and just to see it actually pulling a vacuum is, it's a great feeling. We're almost over to that corner already. We've only been at it here for 3 odd minutes, so it's going pretty quick. It's going much more slowly through this area here.
All right, we'll switch back over to making things go fast in the stop motion. So it went pretty quick. You can see it following those infusion lines through that EnkaFusion, and then it gets over to all the areas where it needs to get to. Now, I should have throttled this back a little bit. Like I could put a clamp right up there near where the resin inlet goes, and I could have slowed it down, but it was my first time and I was freaking out a little bit. You can even see here I start drawing some contour lines of where the material is, because as it gets nearer the finish, you have to think, boy, it's pulling the resin all the way through the part to get to where it's going. So of course it does start off a little bit more quickly, but once it's drawing through the entire part, it's pulling all the resin that you have to wet out the rest of the part through the part. Oh, there's puppy dogs. Anyway, so then you see the resin block there and the headlight doing its job. Right, so one day later, we pull off all the materials. So the peel ply, just so easy to come off. That EnkaFusion, not so easy to come off. So had to wrestle it out of there. It was good and stuck, and I wanted that the inlet for the resin back. I'm cheap. I wanted it back. Give me that back. Anyway, here the last of it. Comes out. There we go. All right, now we start the demolding process. This is hair raising. Is that the word? I did have to unbolt that front section of the fender to get it all out. So there's that part.
That's sticky. I could clear this lip. Oh! Well, I hope we got that on film. We got it out. Oh my. Oh my. Oh yeah. That's what we wanted to see. Woohoo! It doesn't weigh anything at all. Sorry I'm laughing so much. That was a lot of work. We just did something cool, people. We don't do something cool every day. You try to do something cool every day. I mean, okay, we got a little... Those are actually spots where the other filler was. Like, yeah, I'll take that. I got no gripes. I got no complaints. That, my friends, is a perfect fender. Holy. What a gong show to get it out. But it's done. On to the next one. Just in case anyone's wondering why the furnace is on. Welcome to September in Canada.
Well, that worked well enough the first time. We're going to do it all again, right? Rinse and repeat. Why not? Actually, this is, I'm starting yin. I've already got, this is the third layer. We'll be covering it up here in just a sec with the foam core, and there it goes. Anyways, this is the other fender, and it went together pretty much exactly the same way. I made a few changes to some of the stuff that I was doing, but not much. I mean, I simply followed the instructions that I was given at Composite Envisions. I mean, this is what Jake said to do, so I did it. It worked just fine. Alright, sticky tape going on. I did learn a lot about bagging. Like, man, bagging on complex parts, that's seriously difficult to do. Not easy at all. You have to really think your way around the whole process. Anyway, I can't emphasize that part enough. Think.
Okay, so that's the peel ply done on the second mold. So this is the driver's side fender. Really happy with the way this turned out. At least I'm learning. So, you know, a lot better on some of the areas when I was putting it in. Didn't make some of the mistakes that I made the first time. Things like be super careful around that fender lip. And I'm just letting it hang loose. it's not actually pinned down. I also made good use of some clamps along the edge as I was putting that spiral wrap in. It's really important when you get some of these change of planes, when you're just dabbing a bit of hot melt glue on that the spiral wrap in order to keep it down nicely. And then it's got, you know, I've glued it in, but it's not super tight in all areas. Like, it can have a little bit of that. It needs to be able to stretch and make sure it can conform to all the parts. So because we're up and upside down here, it's important that up underneath that lip it's done correctly. And then over here in this corner where the headlight area will be, that's one of my big resin blocks. So it's got that peel ply on it because it's really hard for the resin to travel through the peel ply when there's no fabric underneath it. So this should all work out well. So now it's just time to get the bagging material out and get this thing bagged up and get it done.
You can see in this part I've used a little bit less of that resin infusion channel. I just wanted to slow things down a little bit. So a little bit less. Again, the bagging, attach it at the corners first and then work your way through, always thinking about where do I need area. You got to have lots of area through where the bag needs to go up and underneath the fender. I don't need as much area to get the bag in around the fender lip, for example. So really watch the bigger pleats going in the back side of this, smaller stuff towards the front. In fact, hardly any pleats at all, didn't even need them around the edge of the fender lip. Now I'm just trying to show you sort of, you know, there I've got the stuff in and away we go. Try to show a little bit about how to get the pleat done. It's tough. Alright, so this one you can see I've got the infusion going there. I've got the clamp in, but it's kind of in the wrong place. And there's the advantage of using that slower resin. So I had a problem in that corner aside from dropping my clamp in. And I had the time to go in and touch and fix that up. Now there was a problem with the vacuum on this one, so the peel ply didn't really get down perfectly everywhere. So anyway, it didn't affect the quality of the eventual part. Same process times 2, where I've got to get all this stuff pulled out, unbolt the front edge here and chop that all off, and then get it popped out. It wasn't any easier the second time around. I knew where it would be stuck, right? That front edge locks in, and then around the lip it locks in. So I would make this mold very differently if I was doing this again, and I wouldn't have as many areas to close myself off.
It's just fun. Unbelievable! Both fenders done! What an epic journey. What an epic journey this was. I believe the fender is fine. There are surface flaws, but they are in the mold. Furnace is on. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, okay, that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got both fenders pulled. It took me about 2 weeks worth of time to get this done, not including the time it's going to take to make the video. But I just wanted to once again show you that we've got Now, we got a driver's fender. We got a passenger's fender. Each one of them weighs about an average of about 2.8 kilos right now. So that's a little over 5 pounds. And they still need to be trimmed. And they still need to have the various reinforcing elements put into them. Again, thank you for coming along on this particular journey. It sure has been a lot of learning. I can't believe those turned out as well as they did. I hope that through this video you've learned a little bit. Go back and watch it again. Have a look at each one of those processes. And then you'll be able to make your own carbon fiber parts. Carbon fiber fenders! Woohoo! And 3. Alright, you gotta be careful when stuff falls out of your garage ceiling. Almost kills you in the middle of a take. Ah!